Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And specifically, I'd like to speak about a film that can be found contained within this box set, which was released earlier by Criterion or earlier this year, which is called Pasolini 101. And I'd like to speak about the second film that's included in this, the second feature film that's included in this on Blu-ray disc number 2, as this is a Blu-ray disc set. And I'm speaking of a film which is described as being from the year 1962. And the name of the film is Mama Roma. Work which is described as being from the year 1962, and it is from the writer-director Pier Paolo Pasolini, and it has, of course, a part of its crew in terms of the cinematography, Tonino Deli Colli, edited by Nino Baragli, and among its incredibly memorable cast, we have people like Franco Citti and Ettore Garofalo, and this film is starring the one, the only, the legendary Anna Magnani, and she plays the role, the title or titular character, who is referred to as, and the name of the film is Mama Roma. And so we have another wonderful and astounding work from the writer-director Pier Paolo Pasolini, continuation of his filmography and his style, and truly a very powerful work, and it's a continuation of his filmography, as I mentioned, figuring into early in his filmography, and also falling on the second disc, number 2 aspect, and therefore following his work, which was Akatone, which we spoke of earlier in a separate video. But now let us continue with his filmography as featured in this wonderful Blu-ray set, Pasolini 101, and this is film number 2 on Blu-ray disc number 2. And that is Mama Roma. So many things I think one can say about Mama Roma, and indeed a lot of those things, or many of those things, or in fact the main points that are brought up, I think, with great regularity and a great deal of confidence are already brought up in the wonderful supplements that are included with this Criterion set. And we'll speak a little bit about the supplements included with the disc of Mama Roma and as part of Pasolini 101. But before we get to that, let us speak or endeavor to speak about what we can try to describe as the plot or story structure of Mama Roma. And I think if we do that, we can point to the title character, Mama Roma herself. This is the Anna Magnani character, who almost immediately, or perhaps immediately upon the opening of this film, realized she is a larger-than-life figure, a very boisterous, very much living in the moment, very, say, emotional, has outbursts of, say, warmth and glee, and genuine moments of, say, passion and intensity, and a type of drive, a very intense drive, and a focus in terms of how she wants to live her life. And I mean this in the context of the film because we're talking, or we're finding her in a type of transition period in her life. We realize that she is, or she has had a life prior to where we found her in terms of the Franco Citti character, her relationship with this character, the Carmen character, and how his transition in life, as we find it, in terms of his moving on from his life of, say, working with Mama Roma in the world of prostitution, how he is now, quote unquote, moving on, or is he? That's one of the great questions of the film. But how this life change on his part, which we find in the opening parts of the film, how this has, among other things, a great effect on Mama Roma's life as well, because we see, among other things, that she is also willing and ready and quite inviting the opportunity to move on from her life in the world of prostitution to a life of, say, economic prosperity and independence and a type of freedom. Which she hopes she can have. She can certainly she expresses it a lot early on, how she has saved up, how she has worked very hard for a number of years in order to reach this moment. And indeed, at the start of the film, we realize, or we come to understand, that she has indeed reached this moment in her life. So this could account for a lot of the boisterousness, a lot of the great wit and charm and energy that she displays, that is almost volcanic off the screen when you see Anna Magnani's performance immediately, or almost immediately. It's also derived from the source of the plot, or this character dynamics, and this brings to light one of the key relationships, if not the key relationship in the film, that between mother and son. Mama Roma, Anna Magnani's character on the one hand, and Ettore, the son, Ettore Garofalo's character on the other hand. And this is the critical, say, impetus, or this is the main reason for Mama Roma to do what she does, to find or to endeavor to try to find a life of honesty and good hard work and economic independence, and thus freedom. Freedom for herself, but also freedom for her son. And she tries to work hard for her son. We see that she is so devoted to the well-being of her son, who is a youth, a young lad, and who seems to also have, say, life before him, or about to open up before his very eyes, in terms of the possibility of a type of economic prosperity and a good work ethic that we see his mother, Anna Magnani, really try to bestow upon him through the example that she's trying to give, while at the same time looking forward into the future, but also realizing that there's also a past, and that past comes back in many ways to perhaps haunt the proceedings, and perhaps even threaten, or potentially threaten, this delicate balance, or this delicate new world, or new livelihood, or new way of life that Mama Roma is trying to construct for herself and her son. And this brings into the fore certain aspects of her own past. This brings to the fore certain aspects of her relationship with the Franco Citti character. And we also see that life is not easy for Anna Magnani's Mama Roma. There are some obstacles that she meets. In fact, there are a number of obstacles that she meets in terms of based on, say, perceptions with regard to her made by others from a class or economic-based class dynamic, or perhaps it has something to do with her previous ties to prostitution, and has something to do with roles of gender and gender roles and economic equality. It has also something to do with the Italian culture or society of the time, the contemporary culture and society of the time, early 1960s. And it's very interesting and fascinating to see how the Mama Roma character maneuvers her way through these adversities to try to take advantage of certain situations, maybe bending the laws of morality, perhaps in one way or another, in order to get what it is that she is endeavoring to achieve. Again, for the purpose of a type of benefit or livelihood, that is to better herself and her own, say, way of life, which is ultimately too about her son and her son's way of life, and her son's, say, ideas about himself and the future for her son. That is also about giving him all the comforts that she can afford to give, in terms of a new house, a new living environment, material things that are, of course, very important to her and to him, and an environment that hopefully she can see him live and grow up into his own degree of economic prosperity and freedom. Now, will this be achieved or not? That's the question. And as I say, there are many adversities and hardships that are thrust across the path of Mama Roma and company. And throughout this journey, we also get a sense of a type of suffering. We also get a sense of a type of economic hardship. The class struggle is at the fore of this film, much like it was in the previous Pasolini-directed film Akatone. But one can say too that there is a kind of a lifeblood, or as I mentioned before, a volcanic type of lifeblood that is embodied by the mesmerizing operatic performance of Anya Magnani. She screams, she laughs, she cries. When she becomes emotional, she really becomes emotional when she finds something or someone essentially potentially threatening the very economic existence and freedom that she has worked so hard to and fought so hard to achieve. She really goes at it, and she will stop at nothing in order to give it her all in order to try to achieve what it is she achieves or she wants to achieve. Now, also, there are threats. There are threats to this existence, and some of those threats, again, emerge from her past. They also emerge in the surrounding environment that her son finds himself in. The threat of, say, petty crime and the influence of others that might sway him into the world of petty crime, which is the last thing that Mama Roma character wants for her son. And will she succeed in being able to save him from these quote-unquote questionable influences or not? That's one of the trajectories of the film that one can see reach a certain climax by the film's denouement. And we see also the notion of working classes and how this is expressed as a type of economic prosperity in various forms, either in the form of, say, the institution of marriage, which we find early on, or it's found in institution of say sex work in the world of prostitution, which is also a very important key part in the context of Anna Magnani's character, and also the circle of friends and other people that we see Anna Magnani's Mama Roma meet, because we also see other women that are similarly situated to the situation or the prior situation of Mama Roma. However, what Pasolini does here, and I think it's part of the Pasolini canon, as it were, is, among other things, the handling or treatment of sex and sex work and prostitution as rather than looking at it through a type of strict and perhaps strict lens of morality. On the one hand, he looks at it in terms of a livelihood and a way of life that doesn't deter from the view or notion or depiction of these people as human beings with ideas and intelligence and an approach on life. And I mean, there are subplots involving friends and associates in this world of Anna Magnani's Mama Roma, which really come to the rescue, in a manner of speaking, in a very interesting way. So as to, again, for the betterment of Mama Roma and her son. So they are depicted in this, again, also this almost utilitarian philosophy as a means of, say, independence. Mama Roma's past life was in this world, but again, as a means of trying to achieve a certain type of independence, which she is forcefully able to achieve, again, when we meet her at the opening moments of the film, among other circumstances, of course, but this is one very important circumstance. So this idea of the viewpoint of socioeconomic rationale and class dynamics linked with sex and independence, and throw into the mix gender roles as well, because we see this idea embodied in the character of Mama Roma and her positioning and her, say, journey throughout the film, from maybe lamenting her past in many ways, or trying to escape from her past in a kind of world of dominance. And that's where the Franco-Chitti relationship comes into play here, as a type of maybe reliance or a dominance, or being dominated in terms of economic dependence, a forced economic dependence on the one hand, but then she is able to achieve a sense of liberation, economic liberation on the other. But she also is labeled with the name Mama Roma. There is this idea of a mother or motherhood figure, and her philosophy or her role, as espoused by her directly, and as she herself expresses it, is for the betterment of her son. So she is a character that is, expressing her own, say, economic livelihood vis-a-vis the notion of motherhood, which she seems to be embracing very lovingly and very much with a sense of duty and devotion that is linked very much to family. And I think this is the one of the great ways that the Anna Magnani character is being represented here, as a type of thorough and thoroughly depicted and strongly represented individual, a human being, and thus laying the groundwork for us, the viewer, to be linked with her struggle and her story and that of the people around her, and seeing whether or not she will indeed achieve her dreams, or whether those dreams will be tattered or in ruins or something of the two, who knows. And then you throw into the mix a type of depiction of Italian society in the 1960s from the viewpoint of working class life, and also the rise of sort of an urban modernity that could also be linked, if we're thinking about the story of Ettore and others. We're thinking the possibility of petty crime, and how the idea of independence and economic freedom is also linked to the possibility and threat of crime erupting at any moment, and whether this will be evaded or not is part of the question of this film. And also the Pasolini aesthetic, which is linking this to a type of spiritual journey, the notion of sacrifice, the notion of self-sacrifice, and also the notion of a type of maybe a type of viewpoint of life and death and sacrifice, which also has visual and artistic links to the story of Christ, and thus bringing to the fore the sense of a viewpoint of Italian socioeconomic issues of the 1960s, which can be said to be, on the one hand, coming from an Italian neorealism tradition, on the one hand, but also very much layering the film with links to works of religious art, also with the application of, say, classical music like Vivaldi, much like we saw the application of classical music in the earlier film Acatone with Bach, and also with the very much operatic performance of Anna Magnani, and a very memorable performance of Anna Magnani. And therefore, we're seeing, much like we commented on the earlier film Acatone as expressing Pasolini's style, at least at this stage in his career, as maybe being a type of push and pull between the impulse of expressing a story in the context of a type of Italian neorealism on the one hand, but then also trying to reject certain aspects of Italian neorealism in favor of, say, a metaphorical cinema language that could have its roots in paintings and religious iconography and literature. And I think that dialogue, that Pasolini style dialogue, is very much on display in a film like Mama Roma, and perhaps it might be said to be developing even further because of, say, the very key, say, references to art and religious art that are commented a lot on in some of the other supplements that we see included with this Criterion set, and also the layering of the music, and also, as I mentioned, Anna Magnani, who's a very famous film star. And if you have a very famous film star combined with, say, non-professional actors like the actor who plays the son Ettore, you have this really interesting blend of, say, neo-realism techniques on the one hand, and then cinematic stylings on the other, which combine, I think, in a very forceful way, and that make one realize that Pasolini is really forging a type of Pasolini style within the context of Italian cinema of the 1960s that has really already found its own in the second feature film by him. There are moments that are so moving and so overwhelming, and you have scenes and shots of say, Italian life of the 1960s on the one hand, but then they are punctuated by moments of, say, serene cinematic beauty, which can be said to be very abstract and almost surreal. And there are shots, compositions of shots and characters composed in some of those, or positioned in some of those shots that are very much painterly. And if you have this type of sense of the painterly, you can get a sense of the authorship of the film, which is another thing that takes maybe the style away from the stylings of Italian neorealism and into the world of what one might call the Pasolini style. And so, for these and other reasons, we have the greatness that is Mama Roma, with the grandiose, wonderfully over the top, and beautifully operatic performance by Anna Magnani. And when you can feel the highs and lows just by the look in her face. You can just sense the earth tremble with her great emotion, whether it's happiness or sadness or somewhere in between, or anger or frustration or type of serenity. You can really feel the vibrations from the cinema or the screen as you watch her performance. Very volcanic, very active, very energetic, and truly one of a kind. So this is one of the great strengths of this film, and it's one of the great captivating points of this film that'll take you from the beginning, middle, all the way up to its inexorable conclusion. And my goodness, what a conclusion this is. Wow. Wow. This is the work which is Mama Roma. The Criterion Collection has released this Blu-ray set, Pasolini 101, with the second Blu-ray disc devoted to Mama Roma, which is designated within the set with a 002 to indicate, I understand, the second feature film directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. And this is described as being from 1962 and in mono sound in Italian with English subtitles at aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. And the booklet, which is part of this great set, Pasolini 101, has in its latter pages descriptions about the master, and I quote, about Mama Roma. This 4K restoration was undertaken by the Cineteca Nazionale in Rome in association with Infinity Plus and Cine 34 at Cinema Communications Service from the 35mm original camera negative and sound negatives, etc., with missing and damaged scenes taken from a reversal housed at the Cineteca Nazionale. This is a work which, unfortunately, I have never had the opportunity to see in the movie theater. I have seen it a number of times, though, including the earlier Criterion release of this on this double disc DVD set. And this was released at spine number 236 in the Criterion Collection Physical Media Catalog. So indeed, we can say that Mama Roma, yes, it is part of the Criterion Collection Physical Media Catalog in this DVD. So it currently sits in the collection as an individual spine number title. Much like some, not all, but some other directed works by Pasolini. So I did rely upon this release whenever I would watch and rewatch and re-rewatch the film Mama Roma. And this was at the time based upon what was described as a new high-def digital transfer with restorations and the supplements too, which are in essence carried over into this new Blu-ray set. And I'll talk about those a little bit later. But this was really great. But I must say that I am very impressed with this Blu-ray set, and I'm very impressed with the treatment of Mama Roma and how it's presented here for purposes of this Criterion release in the restoration here. I mean, I think it's crystal clear and sharp, and I love there are moments of clarity and crispness, and when the film goes into outdoor settings. There are many outdoor settings. There are a lot of scenes that take place at night with kind of roaming cameras that are sort of floating in the air as we follow the characters from on front. Some very, very fascinating camera work here. By cameraman, the cinematographer team headed by Antonio Delicoli and of course Pier Paolo Pasolini, which also is another way that one can say that this is, on the one hand, maybe relying upon and also resisting aspects of Italian neorealism in cinema and the use of the camera. But Uh, the point is that the nighttime scenes look fresh and sharp, and the contrast between the light tones and the dark tones is really pronounced, and it comes through so strikingly here. And I think that really adds to the sense of a type of split, or a type of tension between two sets of, say, urges that are pulling each other apart. That which can be represented maybe metaphorically by the threats towards their livelihood, Mama Roma and son's livelihood, by the external threats presented by the Chiti character and others, or it could be maybe the other side, represented by a type of urgency, or a resistance, or a sense of wanting a type of prosperity, as represented by Mama Roma and her story, and her character depiction. So I think that's very relatable, and when one notices the stark contrast between the black and whites in the black and white photography here, and all the gradations of gray in between, really have a sense of enhancement, and there's a crispness which I think is very striking indeed. And even some of the details of quote unquote blemishes, or quote unquote defects, are integrated and preserved very nicely. I mean, this film is very famous for a number of reasons. One point of its fame, or infamy, I guess, depending on how one looks at it, is the opening credits. And there's a moment when you can see there's a very obvious type of blemish, or quote unquote defect, that's part of the opening credits. But actually, it works to the film's great advantage, and the restoration isn't removing any such defect or blemish. I mean, in fact, it's a very famous inclusion of a fly, and the fly is actually remarked upon in the essay on Mama Roma by James Quandt, which is part of the booklet here, which is really, really cool. And I find that type of, say, preserving the integrity of the film all the way down to something as seemingly, type of a mistake as the inclusion of the fly silhouette on the opening credits. I think that's really wonderful, and it adds to a sense of, say, the quote unquote realism on the one hand, but also a reminder of the style on the other. And so this is, again, my very long-winded way of saying that for me, this will be the go-to place for me to whenever I revisit Mama Roma. As much as I loved this earlier DVD set, and I really did love this, and I still do, for me, this Blu-ray release, which relies upon the recent restoration of this, is really top-notch, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And next, I'd like to speak about the supplements that can be found together with this second disc. So once again, we have a number of discs, Blu-ray discs, that are included in this Pasolini 101 box set. And on disc 2, we have the film Mama Roma, which is right here, 002. And then we have the movie and some other options which are found in this Blu-ray menu. And I have the Blu-ray in the machine right now, which is projected right now behind me. And then if we go to the supplements part of this Blu-ray, we can see that there are a number of supplements that are part of this package here. And I should point out that these supplements were also made available in one of the DVD discs of this double disc DVD set right here. So it's nice, however, to get a carryover here. And indeed, with respect to the first one, the segment called La Ricotta, which is part of the omnibus film Rogopag, Rogopag, where Pasolini provided a segment in such omnibus film from 1963 called La Ricotta. That is included here, and it was included as a feature with the earlier DVD set, but I must say that this has been restored according to the supplement itself. A 35 minutes. This is a 35-minute segment from that omnibus film, and according to the notes that are found at the start, we have the idea that this was part of a 4K restoration done circa 2022. So that's really great. I should point out that the sub-menu here indicates in 1962, the year in which Mama Roma was released, Pasolini made La Ricotta, about a director filming the Passion of Jesus as part of the anthology film Rogopag, Rogopag. The short was mired in controversy, but marked an important turning point in Pasolini's thematic, political, and stylistic development. It says in 1962, although La Ricotta and the omnibus film overall has been described as being from the year 1963. And in fact, in the earlier DVD, it's described as being from 1963, at least on the back here. So, in any event, this is a 35-minute segment which has a very interesting cast. I don't want to say too much about the cast because I want to preserve, say, the surprise or the intrigue, again, for those who have yet to see this short film. Let's call it a short La Ricotta, or the segment La Ricotta. But I should say that there are a number of themes and plot devices that are part of this. To describe the plot very briefly, we can say that it is about a film shoot concerning a film about the Passion of Jesus and the aspects of Jesus Christ, and thus the introduction or the integration of religious imagery in terms of the film within the film that's being made. But in the background, or we see how the film is being made, the behind the scenes, which is part of this film or the subject of La Ricotta, and we get a sense that the production seems to be concerned about things or aspects that are seemingly far from the concept of a type of fidelity to the principles and aspects of the religious teachings of Jesus Christ, etc., as perhaps otherwise being depicted by the filmmakers within the film itself. And you throw into that a sense of rowdiness, a type of comedy, the idea of quote-unquote modern day or pop songs that are part of the proceedings, and how this could be said to be maybe a metaphorical type of cinematic blasphemy from certain circles, which is the reason why, or one of the reasons why, this is described as being mired in controversy. There's also an interesting plot point about wanting to, being hungry in terms of an extra on this film shoot, and just wanting to get a bite to eat, thus giving rise to the title of the film, La Ricotta. But also it's linked to a sense or a type of plot point which we had actually referred to earlier in an earlier film from 1961 called Acatone, which is also directed by Pasolini, in terms of doing a physical act after having a full meal, or eating and having a feeling like your stomach is full, and what happens after then, linking it to life and death, and a type of maybe ne'er-do-well or sort of overly carefree spirit, as it were. So it's linked to Jesus Christ, again, film within the film, and there is again this very direct and very purposefully layered in aspect of maybe a depiction or a mocking of certain, say, religious principles, or perhaps, to put it another way, of the way in which religion is handled by the current generation, and whether that is itself a type of blasphemy, or whether it is another way in which one can say that the aspect of religion is linked to an aspect of, say, economy, and the current socio-political aspect of the status quo, and the various generations thereof, as represented by the film crew or film set. So this is, I think, really a remarkable film, because it does employ aspects of, say, very purposeful, maybe silent film cinema. There's moments when the film gets cranked up, and there's a use of an almost zany, physical comedy type of soundtrack. There are moments of satire. There are moments of really film within a film language and aesthetic, which can be said to be a marked difference from the way in which Italian neorealism was used in some of the earlier films, or some of the other feature films that we have spoken of up to now, Acatone and Mama Roma. So that's probably the reason why Criterion describes it as an important turning point in Pasolini's thematic, political, and stylistic development. because one can say that this is yet a further departure from the Italian neorealism beginnings of Pasolini, although one can still argue that even those quote-unquote beginnings were still a type of direct contradiction or direct rejection of certain principles of the cinema of Italian neorealism. So regardless of that, or maybe depending on the degree in which one espouses that viewpoint of Pasolini's cinema, nonetheless, La Ricotta is really a key milestone in the cinema of Pasolini, and its conclusion here, it's really wonderful. I must say too that it looks brilliant. It looks great, and so I'm very pleased with it. I mean, I'd seen it many times before on many other releases, such as the DVD here, and other releases actually that are non-Criterion. But this is, I love the way it looks and sounds here. So La Ricotta, a very important key work in the filmography of Pasolini, and I'm glad it's always been made available, and now it's still being made available, such as on this Blu-ray disc. So that's the first supplement. Next, we have a documentary, which is described as being from the year 1995, and this is approximately 58 minutes. Pier Paolo Pasolini, and it's described as being made in 95, the 20th anniversary of Pasolini's murder. And this work is described as examining the central ideas in the work of this legendary and controversial artist. So this is wonderful because it does borrow from, or it's charting a type of biography of Pasolini's life, relying on or using aspects of his literary works and cinema works, such as Petrolio, such as Porcile, and La Ricotta, Acatone, Mama Roma, Oedipus Rex, Hawks and Sparrows, Salo, Gospel According to Matthew, etc. I should point out that there are wonderful discussions here about what are described, for example, as transfiguration of realism, and how this is linked to, or otherwise a rejection of aspects of the traditions of Italian neorealism in cinema. And this is expressed in examples like the film Mama Roma. And I should point out too that there are, charting Pasolini's life, his feelings with regard to the war, and his feelings towards fascism as it was expressed and rose and found a type of political embodiment in the history and society of Italy during many key moments of Italy's history, as lived through quite directly by Pasolini and his family, as described here in this an hour or slightly shy of 1 hour documentary. And also how his career was almost transforming from the sense of, as I say, for lack of a better phrase, Italian neorealism roots on the one hand, but then transformed into discussions about myth and fables and legends, leading into very frank and quite direct links to literature and sex, and then as expressed in the film is known as the Trilogy of Life, and then a brief discussion on his final work, which is called Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom, so which is also in the Criterion collection, by the way. So this is, I think, a really fascinating and a key documentary into one's own exploration into the life and times of Pasolini, also expressing to us his work as a writer and as a poet, and how and why he turned to cinema as his, or one of his primary methods of expression, his artistic expression. I should be very clear, however, that my strong recommendation is that you watch all the films in the box set before you watch this. It's a really great hour-long documentary into the life and times of Pasolini, so it's definitely worth checking out. Don't get me wrong about that. But it does give away certain plot points of films, and it gives away the endings of certain films. For example, it does give away the ending of La Ricotta, or it gives away the ending of, say, Mama Roma and Acatone, etc. So, and it does chart through essentially the career of Pasolini, not just Mama Roma. So it's not Mama Roma centric, and also there are other films that are discussed in detail, including the endings. So, and it's a type of overview. So in those senses, or for those reasons, my strong recommendation would be to watch this hour-long documentary after you've seen all of the films in the box set. That's my strong recommendation. But once you've seen all the films, you can turn to disc number 2 and watch this great documentary. And I really strongly suggest that you do, because it's really excellent. And then we have an interview with Bernardo Bertolucci. And this is described as being from the year 2003. And this is Bernardo Bertolucci on Mama Roma. It's approximately 6 minutes, or 6 minutes 30 seconds or so. And filmmaker Bernardo Bertolucci began his career as a production assistant on Pasolini's first film, Acatone, in 1961. This interview was recorded in Italy in the fall of 2003. So Bertolucci here speaks again about a number of things, about his descriptions of Italian cinema in the early 1960s. When Pasolini first emerged on the scene, the cinema scene, and sort of the traditions of neorealism that were continued on from the post-war era into the 1960s. And he describes Pasolini, again, in a very respectful manner as very complex, almost a very aloof, or type of loner. I think that's the word that's used here. And having a sense of, say, a real intelligence and complexity which shines through in his works. And he also describes maybe the relationship or the compare and contrast between a work like Acatone and a work like Mama Roma. And he describes the films as being very different, and he uses this idea of, let's say, the idea of the post-Rossellini film on the one hand, which is a type of veiled hint towards the roots of Italian neorealism in the embodiment of Pasolini's early works on the one hand, but then he sees a type of transition, and as embodied, say, by the sort of operatic performance by Anna Magnani, who herself has very key traditions or key links with the Italian neorealism cinema traditions, of course. But I think by this time there is a very interesting type of dialogue that's happening at the very heart of the maybe identity or identities, if you will, and the history or histories of Italian cinema. It's happening right before our very eyes when we watch Acatone and Mama Roma, and Bertolucci, I think, points to this very well. So I think for these and other reasons, it's definitely worth checking out the Bertolucci discussion or interview on Mama Roma. This is approximately 6 minutes or so. And then continuing on, we have another the Bertolucci interview, and as well as the Pier Paolo Pasolini documentary, were found on the DVD of from Criterion, by the way, and also found on such DVD but carried over here is the Tonio Delli director of photography discussion or interview. And this is he worked as the director of photography on 11 of Pasolini's films. This interview was recorded in Italy in the fall of 2003. It's according to this. So we have here a discussion on approximately 9 minutes, and this, the idea about the photography and the focus by Pasolini, the insistence on finding faces. He also speaks, which has been remarked upon in many places, such as the essay Anna Magnani, and how he describes it as being, she was quote unquote difficult to work with, according to Pasolini, but that according to Tonio Delli, but that Pasolini was able to find a way to work with Anna Magnani, including handling what he describes as Pasolini's maybe irritation in the way that Anna Magnani would move her body and move her hands, but that a solution was perhaps reached in terms of closing in the camera on her face, thus cutting out the way in which the hand gestures would emerge on the screen. So that's an interesting thing in and of itself. Plus, also, he remarks about how Pasolini had this great interest in the way that the street corners looked, all the way down to the blemishes on the wall. And you see a lot of those scenes in the film of Mama Roma, the street scenes, the nighttime street scenes, for example, and the look of the moments in what can be described in sort of a shanty town-like environment, which is also, I think, very reflective of what Pasolini and company are trying to remark upon in terms of an expression of a working class ethic and the sort of economic prosperity that is being that's part of, say, the ambition and the realization of a person like Mama Roma, who's very much part of this world, and she acknowledges such. But there's also this sense of class mobility on the other, and a sense of hopefulness, and perhaps the possibility of prosperity, which is also very important, and it's expressed in the very sort of photography as well, as discussed in Antonino Delicoli interview here. Plus, he describes the use of the film stock and this notion here about how the use of the film stock and the use of, say, orange colored filters really enhance the further contrast between the blacks and the whites in the photography. So contrasts seem to be very important. So for these and other reasons, this is a great interview to check out. So please check it out if you can. It's approximately 9 minutes. And that's not all, because we have Enzo Siciliano, and who's the author of Pasolini, a biography from 1982. It's described as being from 1982. This interview was recorded in Italy in the fall of 2003, and this is described as being 9 minutes. And here we have Siciliano speaking in a kind of academic way about certain shots that ring true to sort of the painterly aspect, links to art and religious art and Italian art, and how we have the performance by Anna Magnani, which can be said to be very towering, and in that way the film could be said to be a vehicle, a cinema vehicle for Anna Magnani on the one hand, but how he describes as the shots in the film are very much Pasolini's. And how, in the context of Anna Magnani's links to Italian cinema and Italian neorealism, how this is setting forth a trajectory from Open City to Bellissima to Mama Roma, which I thought was a very interesting way of describing, say, the progress, or not progress, but the development of the history of Italian cinema as embodied by Anna Magnani, which is part of the performance of Mama Roma, which is in turn linked to the work of Pier Paolo Pasolini. It's all going hand in hand. And the sort of the painting antecedents are described here, and the like. So I like this. It is discussing Pasolini, but focused on Mama Roma in a type of academic scholarly discussion. And it is 9 minutes, and it was something that we'd seen before, but it's great to have it again here now. So please check this out if you can. It's approximately 9 minutes. It's really wonderful. And then the supplements end with a trailer. So this is really wonderful. Again, it's everything that we've seen in the previous releases. So, but we are getting some great things already, because it was already great. And it would have been great to see new things, of course. It would have been great to have, say, a commentary track as well, which we don't get included with Mama Roma. That would have been nice to have. But we do get some great interviews, which are very filled with information. And we do get the inclusion of the excerpt from the omnibus film, so the excerpt being La Ricotta, which of course has been readily made available maybe through previous releases, Criterion and elsewhere, but it's great to have here. And it's also a wonderful reminder in the context of the box set Pasolini 101, just how key it is in the context of Pasolini's career, and also a great contrast between that film and Mama Roma, which were made essentially around the same time period. So that's great to have that. Plus, you have the film Mama Roma itself. So all in all, I was pleased with the supplements as they occurred before, and I'm still pleased now. And then we will talk in a separate discussion about the presentation of the box set art as well. I should point out very briefly that this second disc is going to be found in one of the sleeves here. It'll be found in this sleeve. I've removed the disc and put it in the player, so it's not here at the moment, but it would go on this part of this this sort of book form, hardbound book way of housing the discs. And then I've also removed the booklet. And as I've mentioned before in the separate discussion on Akatone, this has an overall comprehensive essay, but it also has separate essays written by James Quandt on each of the films. And that is also true for Mama Roma, which starts on page 30 of the booklet. And this is another wonderful, sparkling, great essay. There's also an excerpt from a poem, 1961, in one of the pages. And also there is a great series of, say, facsimile storyboards for Mama Roma, dated 1962. So this is a wonderful essay, and it's written not like a plot synopsis, but it's written like an academic essay. So you're getting an academic essay that's really worth it. The writings are different than what we got in the earlier DVD from some years back. So if you're interested in having a complete package of, say, writings, my suggestion is maybe try to find the earlier DVD, which had some interviews, written interviews with Pasolini, etc. But that doesn't take away from the brilliance of the James Quandt essay, which I think is fantastic. So fantastic. He even makes reference to the fly at the beginning of the titles, which is really great, and then talking about Vivaldi and talking about links to religious art and paintings, and the Last Supper, and the links to visual links and also thematic links to Christ, to Jesus Christ, and Mama Roma as a type of self-professed figure of motherhood, and how that is a very loaded and very, very meaningful and multifaceted term and terminology, which means many things across the board in this film, Mama Roma, and also as expressed by Pasolini and Anna Magnani. So, and so for these and other reasons, the essay is sparkling, it's top-notch, and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Again, watch the film first. Watch Mama Roma first, and you can read the essays, the essay on Mama Roma by James Quandt, and enjoy the pictures there as well. So it's really great. So I'm very pleased with this. So far, so good for my eyes in the context of this Blu-ray set. And again, it's another wonderful reminder of the legacy of Pasolini, cinematic legacy of Pasolini that is grounded, rooted, very appropriately so, in his entire filmography, the body of works that he has done. And one key work in that filmography, undoubtedly, is this work. It's so important, so towering, and it feels similar, it feels so different. It feels so similar from Akutoni, yet it has so many contrasts, which I think make it so great. And already, it's a companion piece, but it's also standing on its own, very forcefully, and with a great sense of flourish and challenge. And I love that. This is the work which is Mama Roma. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great works, including Mama Roma, including the works of Pier Paolo Pasolini, including the works in this set, and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.